Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of From URL to IRL. My name is Valerie. I will be your host every week of the show. I will be talking to people who work in the music industry, tour managers, artists, musicians, all kinds of people from all walks of life. I will also be doing solo episodes talking about my relationship with music and the ways that it has helped me and the ways that it has affected me and things that I have done that are music related over the years. So let's take a minute and we're going to talk about just how this came about. So from URL to IRL, I came up with the name because I have always kind of seemed to meet people online ever since I was a kid. I was on a message board for an artist that I liked, and it just I made friends. I met people, and usually they would just be online relationships, which was perfectly fine with me. I was kind of a loner when I was a kid. I later found out as an adult that I am neurodivergent. I'm autistic and have ADHD. So that kind of makes sense because I preferred to be alone. So once we got a computer, I would be on the computer talking to people all the time. But yeah, so I made friends all the time online, and usually it was from something music related. An artist that I liked enough that I would do stuff about it. I was an artist named Terry Clark. She was a country artist that I found when I was probably about 7 years old. Maybe I was a little older. I don't really remember. But I joined her fan club, and I would go on a message board that you got to go on if you're part of the fan club. And I would talk to people on there. Probably was way too young to be doing that, but I did it anyways. Here we are. And I also convinced my mom to take me to concerts to see her. So I grew up in Houston, and they had this huge rodeo. I believe that was the first time I saw her, was at the Houston rodeo. And I saw her at the Houston rodeo a couple times. My mom took me to San Antonio, which was like 3 hours away from Houston. I saw her at Billy Bob's in Fort Worth with one of my friends that I made actually on her fan club message board. And then I have seen her at a few other places throughout Houston and met her probably 3 or 4 times. With being in the fan club, you got to have perks, which was meet and greets. And that was like the light of my life. So growing up, I listened to a lot of country music. My mom pretty much only listened to that. And so I just kind of followed along and would listen to country too. So I grew up listening to like Alan Jackson, Tim McGraw, George Strait, Reba McEntire, Trisha Yearwood, those like really iconic artists from the 90s and early 2000s, I would say. Faith Hill, Jody Messina, Martina McBride. She also listened to artists from like the 60s and 70s a lot, like Carole King, Carly Simon, Earth, Wind and Fire, James Taylor. So I would listen to that a lot when I was growing up as well, but mostly country. And then I also played instruments. Once I discovered and really remember liking music, and it wasn't just listening to it, I needed to also play it. So when I was 9 years old, I was in a private school and they had a little band that you could join. And so my mom had played the flute when she was younger. So we already had one and that was easy to access. It was free. So if I didn't like it, we weren't spending money on something that I would inevitably not continue with, which makes total sense now, knowing what I know, that I would pick things up and eventually not be interested in it. So I played the flute. Not gonna lie though, they never taught me to read music. So when I would be sitting there playing, I was really just making shit up. Did not know a single thing about that flute. They just assumed I did. And I would just sit there and just make sounds while we were playing. But that did kind of segue into other things that I figured out that I did love too. Like I have a best friend that I've known since I was 5 years old. Her name is Molly. and she's actually going to be in an episode, so you will get to meet her. But she had a piano in her house, and I remember one day she was sitting down at it. I think she was taking lessons or something, and she was playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And so I had her teach me how to do that, and that really like sparked something. Like I somehow weaseled my way into having my parents get me a little keyboard so that I could learn to play it. And that was a really big part of my music history as well, was learning to play the piano. Again, couldn't read music yet, so it was mostly playing stuff by ear. Like I would listen to music and I would just figure out the notes and how to play them on the piano. And then when I got into middle school, I learned how to play the trumpet. I joined band, and trumpet was the instrument that I ended up picking. Originally, I'd kind of considered playing the drums, but I decided that might be a little too complicated and that it wasn't really something that I would love. So I chose a trumpet. I loved the trumpet. I immediately did well on it, was always in the higher chair, which means like you would audition and you'd get to play parts, and whoever did it the best would be first chair, second chair, third chair, so on. Very rarely did I get below fifth chair. And so that was really awesome, and it made it really easy for me to make it into the higher, more advanced bands really quickly. I believe by halfway through my sixth grade year, I might have already been in what's called the symphonic band, which they're the band that goes to concerts. They go to competitions. They would do the marching band, or they would play for the band. They didn't do marching band yet, but they would play for the football teams when they were playing. So I did that in middle school. We did move a lot, though, my seventh grade year, which kind of screwed things up a little bit. I ended up going to 3 different middle schools in the span of 6 months. So by 8th grade, I was pretty much kind of over it. I didn't really get to do it as much as I wanted to because it was just hard. You know, being 12 years old, 7th grade, middle school, it's hard. So add moving 3 times to that, and I ended up quitting by like the beginning of 8th grade and doing theater instead. But I loved still playing it. I would play my trumpet for, just for fun. And I also would still play the piano. At some point there, I also convinced my father to buy me a guitar, a little Fender Stratocaster. And so I would play that a lot. I never really got good at guitar. The picking and things like that just was above me, and I just didn't care. But it was fun to play, and I learned how to play like Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, stuff like that. And so music has always been extremely vital to my state of being. I would say around middle school is also when I really started kind of branching out into different artists. I started listening to more like pop music a little bit before middle school. I think when I was probably about 9 is when, maybe I was a little bit younger than that. I don't know. The Spice Girls were also a really big thing, and I loved the Spice Girls. I remember listening to them and going to see their movie. But I guess they were kind of like the gateway to other music. I remember like Britney Spears was popular. I never really liked the boy bands. Makes sense now. But I never really liked the boy bands, but I loved like Christina Aguilera, Pink. I discovered Pink, and she was like amazing to me. And I would listen to, so I discovered rock. That was what it was. I really discovered rock music. So like Evanescence, Seether, Breaking Benjamin, Nirvana, Alice in Chains. I started listening to a station in Houston that we had called The Buzz, and they were the alt-rock station. So that was pretty much what I listened to when I was listening to the radio. I also would have like my little CD players, and I would listen to music in there all the time. I had the little Walkman for a little while. Most of the time I had an iPod. I remember I had my father buy me one of those little pink iPod minis, but I always had music going, always. Like I'm literally known amongst my family and friends to always have music in my car, in my room. I had one of those big stereo systems. Then I had my iPod and my headphones, I'm always listening to music. And I would say really it has been the major contributor to me being able to make friends. Like I mentioned, I was on the message board for Terry Clark. And then once I discovered like Evanescence and Seether, I joined their message boards too. I made some really cool friends on the Seether message board. And we ended up going to a concert in Houston for BuzzFest, which was a festival that The Buzz, the radio station I mentioned, put on every few months or so. And I met my first and only boyfriend through that. He had just happened to be at the show as well, and he knew my friends that I was with. So that is how we were introduced, but he was too scared or too shy, whatever, to say something to me when we were at the show. So he ended up introducing himself via the message board a couple weeks later. So that has just always been a really big part of my life, is making friends and meeting people online. So why now? Why do I want to start a podcast now? I feel like COVID really kind of affected people that are adults, especially us younger adults, in making friends. I mean, it's already hard enough as it is. Then add on top of that for, I know, a few years, we weren't allowed to go out. So for those of us that were already not super outgoing, meeting people in person was hard. Personally, I never had that problem. Like I said, I've always met people online. All of my good friends, except for Molly, I have met online. I have a friend that I met on Reddit completely by accident. I have a friend that I met in a Taylor Swift group because I'm a big fan of Taylor Swift. So I have never struggled with it, but hearing their stories and how they struggle with making friends, I really want to, kind of give that a platform, because community is so important, especially, when people start having kids. A lot of us in the millennial age group don't have that support system that other generations had. So friends and chosen family are extremely important. So I would love to, have people listen to this show. And I plan on forming like community pages for people who have listened to the show to come on to and meet people that are like-minded, as well as help like kind of form relationships with people. So yeah, I really just want to help that and help foster relationships like that. Also, just music and fandoms and, the kind of music that you grew up listening to or listen to now, it really is such a big part of people's identities. And I just find it so fascinating. So I would love to just have conversations with people about that. I already have planned 2 guests. One of them is a musician for a country artist, and the other one he used to own a recording studio in LA, and now he has a nonprofit organization in Oregon. And I believe it kind of helps people to have access to music and instruments so that they can play it. He'll be my second guest. I already have one that I'm working with. And then, so he'll be my second guest, and we'll get to kind of have that conversation and talk more about that. I feel like it's finally, the right time to start a podcast. I love to talk. I work in sales as my day job, and I am regularly having, hard conversations with people because I work in senior living. So I help people to figure out, is my community the best place for their loved one, for themselves? What are they going to be doing? What are they wanting, with their life for the next however long they plan on being in the community? So I love talking to people, and I love getting to know them, and I love finding out what makes them tick and what would help them best be able to mesh well in the community that I work for. So I really just want to talk to all kinds of people who love music, work in music, just are around music, I would love to just kind of find out, what they have learned being in the music industry. What are things that people don't expect to happen or know or learn when you are working in a field that, you probably got into because you also love music. I love to talk to people that are in other fandoms, people that love certain artists so much that they follow them to, 30 of their 70 shows that they might have on a tour. That is fascinating. Like, how can you possibly listen to a song, live 30 times and not get tired of it? Obviously, like listening to it on a CD, you can do that, but seeing it night after night being performed, seeing the same show over and over again, that's fascinating that people love that enough to do that. And then I would also just love to talk to tour managers, people that work behind the scenes of the music industry that we don't see, that we don't know about. So they get to have, the experience of helping create this amazing work of art, but they don't have to live in the public eye like the artists and musicians who play it do. So that is kind of my why for that. So I would also like to talk about a little bit more about music that I like and ways that it has helped me as an adult. So I would say the biggest one who has an effect on me was Taylor Swift. My friend Molly that I mentioned, she actually found Taylor on MySpace back in like 2005. She was really good. Molly has always been amazing at finding new music before it really gets big. And I was still in my like rock phase at this point. So I wasn't really listening to country anymore. But, one day I was going to Molly's page and there's this song playing. And I was like, it's really interesting that she's using this other artist's name in the song and just blatantly, mentioning it. But I loved the song. And so I went on her page and lo and behold, it was this now humongous artist named Taylor Swift. And I remember looking at her MySpace and seeing like her pictures and thinking how pretty she was and how she looked like she could be a model. I will never forget. She had this picture of her in like a white collared Abercrombie shirt. And she had the collar popped because that was what was popular at this point in time, was popping your collars, whether it was for a joke or seriously. But I remember thinking that she looked like she could be an Abercrombie model. But her song that she had on there was just so good. And not long after that, she ended up releasing her debut album, and I fell in love with it. It immediately became like part of my identity. Molly and I listened to that album so many times. We sang it karaoke. We listened to it when we started driving. I had a friend that had horses because I'm a horse girl. I've been riding horses off and on since I was like 6 years old. So I had a friend that had horses, and we would go to her house. We would drive out there, and we would listen to Taylor Swift the entire time. I also worked for a horse camp for a short amount of time when I was like 19. Would listen to Taylor Swift and sing her all the time. Like my little girls that were my campers that I worked with knew me as being a fan of Taylor Swift, and we would listen to Taylor all the time when we were in our cabin or when we were doing activities. And we did a little karaoke thing at the end of camp, and I sang Taylor Swift. Molly and I ended up seeing her in 2007, opening for Kenny Chesney, and there was like 100 people there. Maybe 100 people. I feel like that's being generous. There was nobody there. And we were at a pretty big like amphitheater in Houston. So it was so cool being able to be at one of those first shows that she did and being able to be a part of her journey through music from the beginning, on top of, growing up with her because we are all around the same age. So that has been really cool. Since I have seen her on like other tours that she's done, I went to the Eras tour. I met, like I said, a friend on a Taylor Swift fan group. Her name is Sarah, and she has easily become one of my best friends. We've gone to Europe together. We went to Coachella together. We went to go see Taylor at the Eras tour. We saw 2 of her last 3 shows in Vancouver together, and it was amazing. Like, we had so much fun. We'd only been friends for a few months when we decided to, and this is a story for another time, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But yeah, we'd only been friends for a short amount of time when we decided to go to that. but she is like one of my best friends that I've ever had in my entire life. And I met her through a Taylor Swift group. Another artist that has been a really big part of my life too is, like, I love City and Color, Dallas Green. He was in a group called Alexis on Fire. And I remember seeing him live for the first time with them back in like 2009. I went to Warped Tour with my brother because my brother was also a big music person and he was in a band and played the bass in the band. And so him and a bunch of his friends and me, we all went to Warped Tour a few times, I think. I want to say our first time was in like 2008. He went a lot more, though. That I want to say he started going in like 2006 or something and didn't stop until it ended. But I love Paramore. I found Paramore, I want to say it was 2005. Their album, All We Know Is Falling, had just come out. Maybe it was like the end of 2005, which I later found out came out on my birthday, which awesome. I love that. But I love Paramore. Hayley Williams is a huge influence on me and has been. I just love how outspoken she is about the things that she loves and she cares about. And she has just been a huge part of my music journey as well. Another artist that I love and have loved for a while is like Billie Eilish. I found her back in like 2018, I think, when she was just a little baby. And I've seen her live a few times and she is just amazing live. And I have met some really cool people through being a fan of her. I've met some really amazing people through being a fan of Paramore. So music has been a huge part of my life for so long that it has really just become my identity. And then also these artists that I love, their albums have been really crucial. In 2017, my grandmother, who was my best friend, she was my person, my everything, like my reason for living, she passed away. And Paramore's album, After Laughter, came out like 2 weeks after she passed. And I remember when they announced it, I was like, oh yeah, this album's gonna hit. I just know I'm gonna freaking love it. And then my grandma passed, and it just ended up coinciding with that album became so special to me and also became like a comfort because Hayley was going through, something. I didn't know at the time yet what it was, but she was, depressed and having her own issues personally, and it kind of came through on the album. And obviously I was not having a good time pretty much the whole 2017. I don't remember much of it because I was just in such a deep depression from my grandmother passing. I actually ended up having to leave Texas completely for a few months just to get away from it. Between that, my grandmother passing, and I was also in a really tumultuous, awful relationship that was unhealthy and off and on, and it just kept going when it shouldn't have. So between that relationship and my grandma passing, After Laughter was just the album. I think I listened to Hard Times like 217 times in 2017 is what my Apple Music replay told me. I listened to like Forgiveness, Pool, No Friends, also amazing. But yeah, that album was just really, really important to me in 2017. Another album that I loved was this album called Free Black by this artist named Black. His song Free, I think I listened to 190 times that year. That whole album is amazing, but specifically that song Free, I just remember just sitting there and listening to it over and over and over again. Over the years, there have been other albums. There's an artist I love. Her name is Banks. And she released an album that had this song called Contaminated. And it came out around the time that I finally ended that relationship that I mentioned. And I think I listened to that song 500 times. I'm not even kidding you, in 2019. Like, I would just sit there and just listen to it over and over and over again, which also knowing now that is a autistic thing to listen to music like that. It's not normal. Well, I would say neurodivergent, not necessarily just being autistic, but being neurodivergent, it's a form of like stimming to listen to a song over and over again. And I've always done that. But especially when a song really resonates with me, I can listen to it over and over and over again until eventually I get to the point where I'm like sick of it and I have to stop for a little bit. but it'll still always be one of my favorite songs. So music has really always been a major source of comfort for me. There are other albums that I've found over the years that just listening to them, they always like bring back memories because music is so like a big part of my life. I'll be listening to it all the time. And so certain albums will come out at a specific time of my life where I just will listen to it for so long that I will automatically, when I hear those songs, start to associate it with that time of my life. Another album that I do that with is the album I mentioned I loved, Pink. So anytime I listen to her first album, I automatically just remember being in like middle school and listening to this song that she had. I want to say it's called like Split Personality or something. Oh my God, I listen to that song all the time. Or the song Supergirl. I don't know why I just went on that. I just remembered that one, but it always makes me think of the movie Princess Diaries because that song was in the movie and I loved that movie. But yeah, so it also has kind of become like a way I associate and remember like times of my life. So basically, that is the story of my relationship with music for now. I don't want to get too much into it because, again, I want to have other things to talk about in other episodes. But if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to follow me on social media. I have a TikTok and an Instagram page. It's just basically from URL to IRL podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. I have a series that I'm doing currently, songs that change my brain chemistry. So I'm going through the alphabet and listing songs that I love. I think I'm on F right now as I'm recording this on June 6th. Also, happy Pride Month. I've got my Pride Month makeup today. But yeah, so thanks for listening and hope to see you in the crowd someday.